points for your class. And just some great opportunities to read for fun and talk about it and engage with it. Okay, so you can swing by the library to fill out some questions or come to an after-school book discussion. We'd like to thank the Parents Club. They've supported this program, today's event, as well as the prizes for your monthly book challenge. We'd like to thank our admin and our faculty for supporting this, and we hope you enjoy it. And please enjoy. All right, Sara Farizan.
Hey everybody, thanks for inviting me and thanks for reading. It's pretty cool to be here speaking with all of you. This is my first in-person anything in about 18 months, so if I'm a little rusty, I apologize. But thank you your teachers have been so great. Other students here have asked really wonderful questions. And this has just been a really great day for me, so thanks so much. I also love your mascot. I did a lot of research on mascots with this book, and some of them are really wild and offensive. And your mascot is maybe one of the best mascots I've ever seen. So go Woolies. You guys have like a chant or something, like a Woolies, or no? Okay. Maybe we'll do that at the end. Have a little Woolies chant. So I'm going to start with saying hello, and we're going to go back in time in the beginning of this presentation to 1984. It's about a billion years. So does anyone know who these gentlemen are? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, yes, very good. And does anyone have a favorite turtle? Raphael. They say in the song, Raphael is cool but rude. Remember that? That's Raphael, yeah. Blue one is Leonardo. Yeah, he's the leader. So Donatello, did someone say Donatello? So Donatello is the best Ninja Turtle. And I will tell you why. Because everybody else has like this really high-tech weaponry, like a sword, a katana, the size. Raphael has the, All Donatello has is that one stick. And he's still doing it. He's still fighting the Foot Clan. He's doing great. And he builds all the technology for the team. Like when they're like, hey, can you build us a truck that shoots pizzas? He does it, no sweat. So by my estimation, he's the best turtle in the group. But in 1984, they came to life in a comic book for the first time, and they were created in the Amherst, Northampton area. Did you guys know that? By two guys, Eastman and Laird, who were just goofing around. They were like, we want to get into comics, but let's create something that's so like off the wall. Like nobody would want to read this. Like it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, what? Like they were just kind of having fun and creating something. And of course we know that it turned into this huge phenomenon. But I always think that's kind of nice to like, when you're in a creative space and thinking about what you want to do, you never know how far the project might take you. Also in 1984, Apple Computers introduced the Macintosh personal computer. This is pre-internet. But it was a pretty big deal if your house had a personal computer. This is Steve Jobs, who was the big creator and founder of Apple. And he was actually of Syrian descent on his father's side. Does anyone know who this is? Prince, very good. So in 1984, Purple Rain, the album and the movie, came out. I love his music, and again, another really creative person who just wrote so many songs, and there's so many songs that he has written that we'll probably never hear that are in a vault, but just someone who like kept creating and kept doing stuff for himself, and then it kind of blew up. In 1984, the Boston Celtics were champions. I don't know if that'll happen this year. I'm hopeful, but maybe I'm glad that Jalen and Jason are doing well, but this is back in the day. I think the shorts are a little too short, so I'm glad that's changed. But you'll have a team that really were incredible in the 80s. And I've always been a Celtics fan. And in 1984, I was born, and that's baby me, with my mom. I was born to two wonderful parents who met and married in Boston, but originally came from Iran. And I grew up very proud of my Iranian heritage because my parents were proud of where they were from and also proud to be American. And they didn't allow the political climate to erase memories of their childhoods or their families or the thousands of year old civilization that the country has experienced. They were new Americans who didn't let the politics between Iran and America cloud how they should represent themselves. They taught me that they are more than the country of their origin or the country of the place they're living in, but they're individuals who are proud of who they are and where they came from. Even when that's really difficult sometimes, or sometimes impossible to explain to someone who only has assumptions or bias against you. Pride in who you are comes from a lot of different sources, but the most important source comes from within oneself. You don't define yourself by other people's assumptions or stereotypes, but by the core of who you are as a human being. So I was shaping up to be a pretty all-American girl with a Persian cultural context at home. As a family, we were learning what it meant to be American, while still holding on to traditions like Persian New Year, Nowruz, which is celebrated in a lot of countries, Iran, Afghanistan, Kyrgyzstan, and many other places. And we had a trilingual home, so we spoke English at home, Farsi, Azeri, Turkish. And my mom, when I was a kid, she would come into the elementary school and bring in the Nowruz display to the other kids to teach them about our Nowruz is like a Persian New Year, and it happens on the spring equinox, which is the first day of spring, and it lasts for about 13 days. It's a very, very old tradition. It's Zoroastrian, which was the religion before Islam came to Iran. And all of the, so a half seen means 7, and seen is the word for S, the letter S. And all of the things on the display begin with S, and they are meant to bring something for the new year. So I always loved books as a kid. I loved reading, movies, comic books, television, anything to do with storytelling. I loved it. And the library was one of my favorite places to go. And I read lots and lots of different stories about different characters and people, and I loved all of them. But so often in the 80s and 90s, especially growing up in Massachusetts, a lot of the characters in the books I was reading were either of European descent or they were animals who could talk. And I loved those books, but I kind of wish there was more, you know? And when I was in high school, I got to read more books by Black authors, by Latinx authors, by gay authors, and that was really helpful. But you know, when I was a kid, there wasn't really too much like that, and I kind of wish there had been. This is a book, a page from a picture book that came out this past year called 7 Special Somethings, and it's by Adib Khorram, who's also Persian, and he has written a picture book that explains Nowruz, New Year, to lots of different types of kids. Much like when I was a book and there were books about Chinese New Year, sometimes, not a lot, or there were books about Christmas, or there were books about Halloween. Now there's a book about Nowruz, and that's really great. And I'm glad to see that there are more authors now of different backgrounds who are telling stories, so that we have lots of different ways to reach kids. This is a drawing that it represents Whoopi Goldberg. She's an actress. She's now a co-host on The View, but she's actually an EGOT, which is really, really hard, meaning she's won an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. So she's had a really prolific career. And she talked about how when she was a kid, the first time she saw Nichelle Nichols play Uhura in Star Trek on TV, and this was, she saw Uhura on the spaceship kind of doing stuff everybody else was doing on the ship. Uhura was like, you know, in charge, she had power. And when Whoopi saw that as a kid, was like, wow, like that's pretty great. I can also be on TV maybe one day if I want to. And so I say that because when the only media portrayals you see are kind of negative, or they're not even there, then you feel like, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be here, right? Like maybe things about me shouldn't ever be portrayed in media. And also, like all the adults I knew who were Persian, most of them were based in medicine or science because that's how they were able to come here. So I didn't know any like writers around or anybody who was like storytelling or writing anything like that. That's me with a basketball in the corner. And it was a huge part of my formative years. I played from about age 7 to age 17. And I stopped when it was clear I wasn't getting any taller. And I was trained when I was younger as a center because I was the tallest back then. And then as I got older, I was like, oh no, I'm a terrible shooting guard. But I loved basketball. It was always a huge part of my life. I played for my traveling team. I played in high school. And it taught me a lot about teamwork, hustling, competition, and how important sports are to a community. And sometimes it can be really great, but sometimes there can be a dark side to sports too. Maybe parents who get a little carried away, maybe fans who say really terrible things when they get caught up in the heat of the moment. I think even too, like when we see professional athletes, particularly people who are trying to stand up and say something, or even if they don't and they're just playing and they don't have a great game or their team loses, you can see all the social media comments that really, some of them, yeah, it's like, oh, you played lousy, whatever, but I think sometimes we forget that athletes are people, particularly when we're, like this past year, seeing Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles, you know, talk about their mental health stuff. I think we forget that athletes are people and have a lot to deal with. So the first time I thought maybe I could be a writer, we were given 6th grade journals to write about stuff we read and like talk about the book and maybe be creative, but most of the time I wasn't. I just kind of did the assignment. But I was a huge Batman fan, and I've been waiting 2 years for this movie, Batman and Robin, which is a terrible movie if you've ever seen it. It's pretty bad. But before the movie came out, I had written, this is in my 6th grade journal right here, and I had written that what I thought the movie could be like, or what I imagined, because I was so excited. And my teacher, like, it was the first time that she was like, yeah, this is creative, keep this up, and I had like good enforcement. And then I saw the movie, and it was so bad. I mean, this movie, it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, saying every bad pun in the world. This is George Clooney as Batman. He won't let his wife watch this movie because he wants her to respect him, and he feels if she ever sees it, she won't respect him anymore. But I saw the movie, and I thought, you know, if this gets made into a film, and this is something that people pay for, like maybe I could write something if I train hard enough and I practice, and I could write something like that too. That's hopefully not as bad as Batman and Robin. This is the lower half of my face, about 20 years ago. And this is me in high school. And I was a junior in high school when the tragic and horrifying events of 9/11 happened. And it was a really scary, scary time for everyone, and the world changed so much. But it was especially scary for people of Middle Eastern descent, South Asians, Sikhs, and Muslims. There were a lot of hate crimes at that time. There was a lot of feeling of xenophobia, and it was scary for many reasons for everyone in the whole world, but especially I felt double scared. And around that time, I found that the student body of my school took a certain interest in me that they hadn't before, asking me questions. Some of them were really like kind of invasive and a lot of microaggressions, a lot of macroaggressions. And they thought, I think they were asking me just a lot of stuff just because I was of a Middle Eastern background and it wasn't cool. But I took it upon myself to kind of, I don't know, be an advocate in a way at 17, which I don't think I was equipped for and I shouldn't have had to do. So I was making speeches in assembly to encourage people not to get caught up in profiling or Islamophobia. I became very involved in extracurricular activities and eventually became school president. But I feel like I got it in my head that I had to be like this really great person, representative. I don't know, which is not sustainable or healthy. And I think a lot of pressure is put on young people sometimes when it shouldn't be, especially by grown-ups. And at that time, you kind of figure out like who's your friend and who isn't, you know. And sometimes there were even people who were nice to you, but it was because they wanted information. So it was very strange. It was a really strange time for me, and it stayed with me for a long time. So as an adult, I did get published, and I had written 2 books before Here to Stay. And I had been writing a lot of books about stuff that I wish would have been around when I was younger and stuff that would have helped me out. So my first 2 books were If You Could Be Mine and Tell Me Again How Oppressed Should Feel. And in 2015, because of those 2 books, I was invited to talk to Australia. I was there for a conference and also there for school visits. So I visited with 4 schools in Australia, all in Brisbane. And these are some students from Bentley High School in Brisbane, and they were really great. And I was doing an exercise with them because they were so excited that I was there and that I was American. And it was the first time that they were just kind of like, yeah, you're an American. There wasn't any kind of like, well, where are you from really? It was like, you're an American. Like, tell us about America. Tell us about like, you know, pop culture there. So I did a thing about asking them about assumptions and about, you know, like what you might think and stereotypes of a place. So what are some things when you think of Australia that come to mind? Yes? Everyone having an Australian accent, very good. Anybody else, Australia, things that come to mind? Yes? I didn't hear it, but...
Australian
Oh, okay. Anything else? Kangaroos, is that what I heard? No. Spiders, big spiders, kangaroos, yes.
Great emu.
Okay, sure, great emu board, yes.
Platypus.
I didn't hear it.
Platypus.
A lot of people? Anyway, so these things that we've mentioned. So I asked them, I said, I did the same exercise and said, when you think of America, what are the things that come to mind? And so the big 3 that came up immediately were fast food and all-you-can-eat buffets. They said, okay, sure. They said gun violence, another one, and racism. Of course, that isn't all we are as a country, and Australia isn't all kangaroos and great emu war and accents. There's more to that country. But it is clear that there is a lot of work to do here, right? And I don't know how that gets better. But it was interesting to be like meeting teenagers in a very, very different country, and you're all very different and they had different backgrounds, but dealing with a lot of the same stuff all over. Also in that year when I came back from Australia, there was a story in the news that really made me sick to my stomach, as all hate crimes do. But in 2015, these 3 young people you see here, so they were killed in their home in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So this is Dia Barakat, who's wearing the graduation cap. his wife, Isor Abu Salha, and her sister, Razan Abu Salha. And their neighbor had taken their lives over a parking space. Or that's what he said anyway. But it felt very clear that it wasn't about a parking space. Like many hate crimes over the years, and that are still happening to different groups of people because of their race, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation. It makes me feel really angry, and it makes me feel kind of hopeless and disappointed. And it makes me kind of want to make sense of it. And so I didn't know Dia, Isor, Razan, and they had different backgrounds than mine. You know, they grew up in different places, and Dia was Syrian American, and Isor and Razan were Jordanian Palestinian American. But they looked like people I knew, and they looked like they could have been, you know, family. So this story stuck with me for a long time. So Dia, who you saw in the graduation class, was a huge basketball fan, like I am, and he loved Steph Curry so much. He's a big fan. So Steph Curry, gentleman that he is, I found out about it, reached out to the family, and put Dia's name on his stickers and played the game for him, which was really cool. So that story stuck with me a long time, and I started writing a character named Bijan, who was also a big basketball fan, and played basketball at his school. And I thought it started with a voice, and then I kept going. And it's about Here to Stay is a story about a young man who finds himself in his prep school spotlight after helping the varsity basketball team win a crucial game. Though his newfound stardom means he's invited to cool kid parties, and he's kind of high profile now, he's also maligned and cyberbullied because he's of Middle Eastern descent. And I don't know that Bijan's story will do much to end prejudice. It's just a story, but I think I wrote it because I wanted to communicate stuff that I felt at his age. And I hope that it leads to conversations in classrooms and at dinner tables about stuff in the book. So that, you can talk about that with a book. It's much easier to do than with real people, And Here to Stay, because it does deal with like heavy subject matter, that can be kind of hard. Like I like to use humor in my work a lot. I think you can bring more people in with humor. So I had Reggie Miller and Kevin Harlan commentate. They work on the NBA on TNT, and they sometimes do commentary together. But I wanted to have them sort of serve as a Greek chorus. And they're in his head when Bijan is having a moment of anxiety, or there needs to be like a moment of levity in a kind of strange or sad situation. And I hope they do a good job of kind of taking the reader through the basketball games, so the action goes a little faster too. And it was really fun writing their dialogue, because you get into kind of like a commentator point of view, where you're like, Bijan's trying to talk to the girl he likes, and trying to pretend to be Kevin Harlan and be like, oh, it's gonna need some icy hot for that burn, Reggie, that kind of thing. So that was fun to do. So there's Bijan and I eating ice cream. He didn't eat his, I don't know why. Probably his book cover, but I don't know that it's a perfect book. I think there's a lot of other books that are really great too, that talk about these kind of issues. But I think I always want to write about stuff that, I wish I had when I was growing up, and that I see you guys dealing with a lot of different stuff. I mean, this book came out in 2018, but I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of same things are happening. And speaking up is hard. You know, I'm not really great at public speaking. That's why I write books. But sometimes I feel like it's necessary to do. And Bijan has a tough time doing it too, and sometimes he doesn't want to. But sometimes it's necessary to speak up for a lot of reasons, like to set boundaries, to stand up for yourself and your friends, and to your community, and when you see something is wrong, and knowing that you belong and never letting anyone else feel like you don't. So I hope that story kind of sends that message. And I want to thank you for reading and for having me here and for listening. And go Woolies, should we do the chant? I don't know if you have a chant. No? Okay. But thank you for listening.
All right, Mark Garabedian.
I'm going to ask some questions,
So I have questions that we have chosen, and people who know, you guys know who you are that are coming up to read them. So I'm just going to call you up and have you read the question. Is Mark Garabedian in here?
Now, Mark.
Mark, say sweet.
Hi, I'm Mark. My question is, did you always want to be an author, or did it just come to you one day that you liked writing?
I think from childhood I always liked writing a lot, and I wanted to do something with it. I just didn't know what that was. And how many of you enjoy writing or think about it, or maybe you don't like it so much but you want to get better at it? Yeah. As you know, starting writing something is really exciting. You start an idea in a project, you're like, yeah, this is great, this is the best ever. And then doing the middle and end is really hard. So I encourage you to keep going and revising. But I think when I was younger, I wrote a lot of short stories and I wrote a lot of stage plays. And when I was in college, I studied communications, but I really wanted to write for television, and my university had classes where you could do that. So I was writing a lot of TV scripts. And then when I graduated, I was like thinking about what else to do, because TV's really hard to break into. And I thought about a lot of the books that I was writing were about young people. So I went to graduate school at Lesley University, which is in Cambridge, and they have a creative writing MFA program. So I was working and also taking classes there, and realized that like maybe I had something with the stuff I was writing. And that's how I got published, was after that program. The work that I had done there ended up becoming books. But no, I always loved storytelling. I think writing as a profession is hard because it takes a lot of time. And I've had jobs in between books because they don't come right away all the time. But I've always wanted to, tell stories. I'm trying to figure out how to still do it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It's great.
Allison Schonberg.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Oh, I can hear. So Allison asked if any of the events in the book were based on things that happened to me growing up. So the school setting is, and you know, a lot of the characters come from aspects of my personality or aspects of people I know. Thankfully, I wasn't cyberbullied the way the internet is, but the internet internet wasn't that, I mean, it was, but it's not as pervasive as it is today. But yeah, a lot of stuff was kind of saying things through him I wish I'd said back then. And I didn't like putting him through sad situations or situations that made both of us angry, but I think it's better for kids to have a fictional character that they can talk about that stuff rather than singling out a kid in high school. So yeah, so the things that happened to him, thankfully, didn't happen in the way that they did, but there are things that I wrote about that I think I wished I had talked about, or that there were grown-ups there that could have better handled stuff. And yeah, so it's kind of a letter of like, when you're writing fiction, you're trying to tell a story, but also communicate something, right? So if I wrote about my actual life in high school, I think it would be a lot of me watching Smallville, which nobody really wants to read about. So that was a fun show. But the things that he dealt with that I wish I could have communicated back then, I think those are, you know. But, and also a lot of the things that happen in the book, like, happen in the news quite a bit. So like the chanting at the end with the USA, like that had happened to two high school students, like at that time in a different state in Florida, I think. So these all kind of tie in a lot of this stuff and try to comment on it and make people especially more aware that it's happening. I don't know what we do about it, but I hope that, you know, at least if you empathize with someone or you can talk about a story, that it kind of makes it not as scary or not as hard. But thank you for the question, I appreciate it.
Giselle Campbell.
Oh yeah.
What caused you to write about the problems that occurred during the book? Hi, Giselle, nice to meet you. I think, yeah, that news story kind of got me started, the one about the uncles that were killed. And when I write something, I always start with the voice of the character, and then hopefully the story unfolds from there. Lately, I've gotten into outlining stuff, so I know what's going to happen before I start writing. But with my first 3 books, it wasn't like that. I kind of started with the voice of the character and what they might be going through. And I think I didn't know this book was going to get published. Just because you've done it once or twice before doesn't mean they're going to publish everything you write. And I think I was just writing it for me, making myself feel better. And then, yeah, and I don't know sometimes when I'm writing if I'm like really writing the right thing. Nothing's perfect. It's just one story, but I think it just started for me wanting to make sense of what's going on in society. So, I'll just do that. Thank you. Eamon Marquez. I like your sweatshirt. Welcome.
Hi. Why did you choose not to punish the bullies, like, indirectly? Why didn't you choose to punish them directly? Why, like, say that you're going to punish officers?
Yeah, I think because sometimes a lot of schools and institutions want everyone to feel good and feel included, but sometimes things get handled differently for different people. And, you know, you want to know that those people aren't really allowed back on campus and they're expulsion, and there's things that, you know, which good, because they shouldn't be doing those things. But I also think there's a lot of work to do for schools and institutions about how we deal with stuff, you know what I mean? Especially a school like that where have a reputation, it's a private school, they want to keep things kind of quiet so that more people want to come. Sometimes things are handled quietly for certain people. I remember there was an incident at my high school that had to do with something that was also troubling to another group of people. And those kids were suspended, but it didn't seem like they were being punished enough. And sometimes when you donate money to a place, sometimes that happens. So the book also talks about that. It's like power structure and power imbalance. And so I kind of wanted to talk about that. And also, you don't want to give bullies too much power too. Like, you know, Bijan, even when he finds out who was doing it, he's like, I can't explain to this person, like, why I matter. You know, they're a terrible person. Like, I can't spend more time on them. And sometimes that's kind of what you have to do. Like, you know, we don't have time for that. But yeah, the bullies get punished. I just don't want it to be about them. You know, it's about this kid, and like he's going to be okay, hopefully. You know? But that's a great question, and I like your sweatshirt.
Emma Jindrysik.
Hi.
Boys.
What?
Oh, well, he's goofy like me, and he has a lot of anxiety like I do, and he also likes comic books and Stephen King books like I do. But I was worried writing a teenage guy, because I'm not a teenage guy, and I don't know if that would come across, so I, you know, tried to study a lot of behaviors and tried to study a lot of like movies and other books that had teenage guys in them. But yeah, he's just kind of, in the first drafts when I was writing it, my editor said, you know, you kind of made him like too perfect. Like I kind of made him like straight A, great, all around guy. And she was like, that's what, like, what's the point of that? Like no teenager can be that perfect. And I think I was trying so hard for him to be like likable, like a superhero kind of, and that's not fun to read about. Like, kind of like everybody has their stuff. And so he came from, I think, saying a lot of things I wish I said when I was younger. And he also came from just, yeah, like trying to figure out where he fits in, and it doesn't matter if he does or doesn't, he's still going to be okay. So I kind of spent a lot of time in his head, which is weird to say because it's my head, but all the characters you build, even the ones that aren't like you, some part of them has you in it. So it's not, I didn't like putting him in sad situations. That wasn't fun. But I think it's great to have a fictional character go through that stuff instead of a real person. Yeah, and I hope he's funny sometimes. But, it's been a while since I wrote it. I can't tell. Thank you for your question. I think all of them have parts of me, at least the main three, which is Stephanie, Sean, and Bijan. Bijan is kind of the goofy, I'm a little anxious, like loves sports, talks to me about the stuff he's interested in, and has dealt with kind of microaggressions and stuff. Stephanie is like over-involved in everything, and I think I was a little like that. I was in a lot of clubs and like student government, and sometimes she does things that she thinks are helpful and they aren't. And Sean is my side that's very existential, like what's the point, okay, like I'm just gonna eat this pizza. So I like writing him a lot. Characters I probably have the least in common with are Jessica and Will. But even Drew, there's a part of me in there too where that idea of like you don't want to be replaced. Like if you see someone who's like dying for your spot on the team, like you get competitive or you get a little worried about that. And I think those are things that a lot of people can relate to. But every character you write kind of comes from something in you, or experience from someone, or experiences you've had with a bunch of people. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I feel like we should do this like The Price is Right. Like, come on down. Hi.
So can you describe your writing process and what is it like?
Oh gosh, it looks bonkers. It is all over the place. I don't know about you guys, but when the pandemic started, I found it really hard to focus. Like I had like 15 minutes of focus at a time, and then I just kept checking my phone or like wanted to watch TV or something. But I try and write every day, but sometimes that's just not in the cards. But I think it's, you know, there's some people who might be like, I like to go to this cabin and look out at the water, and none of that happens. Like you fit it in when you can, and so for me, I'm a deadline girl. I like to know when something's due. I still procrastinate, which is really bad, but I think that's also part of the process. I like to now I like to outline stuff so I know what's going to happen, but I also feel like when I have writer's block or when things aren't coming, I like to go for a walk or do something else and then come back to it. I think just the act of coming back to it is really important. A lot of you, I'm sure, have stories or things that didn't finish, or things that you're like, I'll get to that later. But it's important to get to it later so it doesn't just like sit there. But for me, I liked going to a library or a coffee shop, and in pandemic that didn't happen. So I had to get creative with space and make like a little area where I know when I sit here I'm going to write. But yeah, it's been bizarre to try and in one way it's been nice to escape in fiction and to work on stuff that I have due that isn't dealing with right now. It's a nice escape. But that's also really hard when all you're thinking about is like current events and what's going on. But keep at it, you know, like some days I do like maybe half an hour because like I don't have that much time. And then some days I'll carve out like a lot of time to do it. It depends. But it's, I'd like to keep doing it, I don't know. But there's no like right or wrong way. And things work for different people. Thanks for your question. And Autumn Ray. Dun, dun, dun.
So, did your family and friends support you while you were writing?
Yeah, I have a lot of, my dad buys the books but then doesn't read them. And he just thinks that like writing a book, like it should be done. He's like, so are you done yet? And I'm like, I just started it like 2 weeks ago. But he's very supportive in other ways. My mom, yeah, she's just always been a champion of my stuff and really, so I feel that a lot. And my friends too, it's nice to have writer friends. It's also nice to have friends who don't write, who are like, you know, be like, I have another job, but okay, good for you with your story. But yeah, it's been really, and also, you know, there are people who don't like my stuff, and that's okay. I don't know them personally, and that's fine. But I think it's important to have people in your corner and to feel like you can talk about the things you're passionate about, whatever that is. You know, because otherwise then why have those people into it? But yeah, I've been really fortunate in having a good support system, because I know there are a lot of writers or a lot of people that don't in general, so I've been very, very lucky. But yeah, I mean, I have one friend who I send her stuff, and I'm like, it's bad, isn't it? Is it bad? Is it bad? And she's like, it's not bad, it's not bad. So it's important to know that even when someone feels like they're being successful or they're doing stuff, there's still all that like insecurity and like you can do the thing, but it's nice to have people to bounce things off of. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, can we just give a nice thank you to Ms. Farizan?
Hi.
I'm in 10th grade.
Hi Nathan, nice to meet you.
Well, my question was, what are you looking forward to at this point in your career?
Oh gosh. Well, that's a great question. I have some projects that are hopefully coming out next year. One of them is a graphic novel, and as I mentioned, I am a Batman fan. Because of the pandemic, it's taken them a long time to draw it. So we'll see if it ever sees the light of day, but that's really exciting. And I'm working on something now that that deals with a lot of the stuff I've done in my other books, but it's not as emotionally draining. It's kind of like the kids that have identities like me get to go on a cool adventure rather than having to, you know, deal with stuff that are going on today. And I hope that I can keep doing this. You know, it's great that people like you want to read the book. Sometimes people don't. So I'd like to keep writing for as long as I can, and we'll see. Yeah, thank you for asking. Oh, sure. Emily Mellon. Hi. Nice to meet you too.
Okay, I'm Emily, I'm in 10th grade, and I was wondering how long did it take you to write your book?
Oh boy. Well, I started in 2015, and it came out in 2018. So I'd say about 2.5 years. And in the first draft, I kind of made Bijan like too perfect because I really wanted kids to like him. And my editor was like, no teenager talks like this. You have to kind of make him human. So, and in early drafts, I think I was obsessed with having them, for some reason, go on a camping trip, like talk their feelings out. And they were like, this camping trip, what's the point? And so that held me up a lot. But yeah, 2.5 years. Sometimes people for books, it takes them a long time. I know I'm a slower writer. I feel like there are other writers who like churn out a book a year, and I don't know how they do it. But it takes a while, like with research and figuring out the characters and what to do. So yeah, 2.5 years. Thanks, Emily. Jay Garfield. Jay Garfield. Hi. Nice to meet you too. I like your shirt.
Thank you. I was wondering, do you see yourself as similar to any of the characters in your book?
All of them. So with Stephanie, definitely her being too involved in every extracurricular, which is a lot. I think with Bijan, a lot of his anxiety and a lot of his joy of basketball, and loves Stephen King books and comic books like I do. And I think with Sean, kind of a like who cares attitude, like he's really on the beat of his own drummer kind of thing. Not so much with Will. He's kind of a jerk. And the teacher's not so much. But yeah, everything kind of, because it's your world you're creating. Some things you take from experience, some things you take from other things that you've read or seen. And but yeah, all the 3 major characters, they're all parts of me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You guys are killing it with these questions. They're really Nathan DePapa.
I'm Nathan, and I'm in 10th grade.
Hi Nathan, nice to meet you.
Thank you, too. And my question is, who is the most interesting person that you know that read your book?
Oh gosh. Do you guys know who Abby Chin is? She's the sidelines reporter for the Celtics. She has a copy of it. I don't know if she's read it, but I think it's really great when you guys read it, because I don't get to see who's reading a book. Unless someone tags me in a review like, I didn't like it, it sucked. But otherwise, I don't get to see you guys, and so it's really, you guys are the coolest people to have read the book because it's for you. But I think it's been neat to see like writers I really admire, like Lori Halse Anderson. She wrote Speak. Really like it, and I think that's kind of been the best audience is you guys and people your age, because that's who I wrote it for. Thank you.
Liam Tucker.
Liam's gonna do great. Here he comes. Hi Liam, how are you?
I'm good, how are you? Dijon is the central character in the book. Are there any other characters in the book that you consider heroic or inspirational?
I consider you to be.
Heroic or inspirational?
Oh yeah. He is the hero in the story, but I think too there are a lot of people who support him and who advocate for the school to be better. I'd say Marcus is a hero, Elle is a hero, Stephanie in her own way, sometimes she messes things up, but, and I think dealing with the cyberbullying, Erin in her own way, because it's tough. Being a person your age in high school is hard. And I think sometimes you have a lot of grown-ups being like, oh, it's the best time of your life, and enjoy your youth. But there's a lot of stuff you guys go through, especially now. And so I think everybody who deals with high school is going through something. Even the bullies in the book, they're all kind of dealing with hard stuff. But I don't know, I think it'd be nice to have a spin-off, like a character who can see their journey in their senior year of high school. But I think anybody who kind of speaks up and speaks out about something that's wrong, even when that's hard, is heroic. That's a great question. Good job, Liam. Adeline Canning. Hi. What are you currently working on? Great question. A lot of stuff. I have a deadline on October 18th for a book that hopefully will come out fall of 22. And I can't tell you too much because it hasn't been announced, but it is a supernatural horror comedy set in 1987 and 1993. And there might be an evil arcade game involved. So it's a bit different from this. But I'm working on that, and I have another book that I'm doing with Scholastic. That hasn't been announced either, but it's going to be for a younger audience. So I'm excited to do that, and for like ages 8 to 11. So hopefully those, I know everything's been delayed with COVID, but I hope they'll come out okay. And then I just grabbed my water, so cool, good job. Thank you.
Marlon Sean.
Hi, I'm Marley. I'm in 10th grade.
Hi Marley, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Did you struggle with writing any part of this book?
The whole thing, Marley. I think it's hard to, I don't know, how many of you are writers in here or enjoy writing? Yeah. And it's hard. It's really hard. No matter what you're writing about, I think starting something can be exciting. And you're like, I have this great idea, I have to get it down. The middle and the end part, right? Figuring out how to finish it is such a challenging thing because your enthusiasm kind of leaves. You might not want to revise it or work on it anymore because you looked at it for so long. But I think too, because it deals with a lot of emotional stuff that was hard for me at that age, I think that also made it more difficult. And the idea that there aren't too many authors who are of Middle Eastern descent or identify as Muslim. There are more now, but it can be hard to be like, oh, this one book represents everybody, and that's not true, right? So that was also hard too, is like I want to make sure I'm telling a good story and that it doesn't harm anybody, you know, and that can be, you know, anything you write might do that, so. But the whole thing is really tough, except for, I don't know, there were some scenes, I liked writing Sean a lot, because he was just kind of like eating pizza whenever, you know, just kind of like, yeah, let's listen to some music. And I think we all need to like Sean in our lives. You know. But thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. I'm just going to say Nick K because I know I'm going to say your last name wrong.
Hi, my name is Nick Cadden.
Hi, Nick. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Do you think the school did enough to help Bijan? And if not, what should it do?
I don't think they did. And I think the point of the book is like, you know, sometimes there's some grown-ups in your corner and sometimes there aren't. And we've seen a lot of institutions like maybe not support students the best way they can. Like last week there was a story in the paper about UMass Amherst. There were a lot of Black student union getting harassing emails and the school not really doing as much the students felt that they should be. So I think that kind of needs more work, you know, because we are living in a world where there is a lot of hateful content and there are people that want to bully people just because of who they are. And I think institutions need to do a better job of like, how do we combat this? How do we make sure this doesn't happen? And what are the consequences? You can't just like email someone something really terrible and awful and not try and find out who sent that and what we can do to make sure that they're expelled or they're not allowed in the community, right? So I don't think the school did do that, and that's kind of the point too. Is like sometimes I feel like you guys are like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like I can talk to a grown-up, but what's the, you know? So I hope that teachers who read it or people who are adults, because a lot of adults do read YA, which is great, but you know, the book is written for you guys. I hope that they take something from that and they're like, okay, what are we doing to make sure everybody in our community feels safe and you know, yeah. But no, they didn't. And I think too, like when the headmaster says, like, we don't do that here. You know how you hear that a lot? That's not who we are. We don't do that. Well, we have a history of doing that. You know, it's like the Australians were like, they think of racism, right? So I think it's important that institutions figure out how to make sure everybody's okay. All right, we just have time for one more. Alana, yeah, I apologize for announcing.
Hi, I'm Alana. I'm in 7th grade.
Hi, Alana. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. What influenced you to come up with the events in the story?
Yeah, I started writing Bijan and his voice after that news story. It really stayed with me a long time. And I think too, like figuring out, okay, like what do you want to say that you maybe wished people knew when you were younger, right? And so kind of having him I didn't like putting a character through that. I really didn't like doing that. But I felt it was important, so like a student doesn't have to, like you can empathize with someone who's fictional, and then you know to empathize with someone who's real. Hopefully that's the idea. Yeah, that news story, that the hate crime, really stuck with me for a while. And I think just that Dia was such a big basketball fan, and I'm a basketball fan, kind of took off from there. But I usually always start with the voice of a character, and then the story kind of takes off from there. I wish I didn't start with thinking they would end up on a camping trip, because that would have saved me a lot of time. But yeah, it always starts with the voice of a character.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, can we thank Ms. Farizan one more time?
Questions. Is that like a woolly thing? It's like we have to be smart. Yeah, it's good. Hi.
Are any of the events in the book based on personal experiences, or if not, where did you get these ideas from?
Not the cyberbullying, I think, because the internet happened when I was your age, but it wasn't as all the time as it is now. And the internet is so important in how we all communicate, but it, you know, over the years you see a lot of mental health stuff that comes from the internet, especially social media and stuff. So I think I was trying to talk a lot about that. And at the time I was writing it, there was a lot of talk about what kind of symbols are okay to have in public and what aren't, like what makes people feel kind of not great to have like a, you know, a statue of a Confederate soldier out and about. So I was thinking a lot of that stuff. And also just kind of things that you guys all go through. I know it's a fictional situation and, you know, hopefully this doesn't happen to everybody, but it gives room for people to talk about stuff that is happening, so that no one kind of, like if a student like me, who's maybe the only kid in the class who looks like me, right? And then gets asked questions that are not appropriate. I don't want that to happen to like another kid, you know what I mean? I want, like, we just have a book to talk about it, and there's a fictional character. But yeah, I don't know. People can say and do really terrible things and not even realize. Like, there are a lot of microaggressions in the book. There are a lot of macroaggressions in the book. But it's just from years of like, you know, dealing with different kinds of people and knowing that who you are is A-okay. So, and thanks for the question. Brian Lowell.
Hi, nice to meet you. I want to start off by saying thank you for being here.
Of course.
Yeah, it's a really cool experience to be able to have the author of a book that we read come to our school. So.
It's cool that you guys read it. It's really great.
Alright. This novel was very relatable for teens, so I wanted to know what went through your mind when you came up with the plot for the story.
I always start with the voice of a character and who they are first, and then you see what kind of journey you're going to put them through. And I just wanted to write a kid who wasn't really noticed at school, and then all of a sudden had all this attention on him. And some of it's great and some of it's not. And I thought a way to do that and to bring people into a conversation about the stuff that goes on in the book. Sports was a great way to do that, and also with humor, and also with a bunch of different characters but different things going on. I worry that the older I get, I'm maybe not going to be able to write teens very well. Because, I don't know, I think you guys are going through so much more stuff than I did, especially with COVID and everything. But I will say that I think you just, one, write something to you never know if it's going to get out there, right? Like when I wrote this, I didn't know if it was going to get published. I just started. And you write something that's you're passionate about and that's important to you, but you also hope that will communicate something, right? And so when I was coming up with it, I thought, okay, what are things that young people are dealing with now and things that I also dealt with when I was younger? And unfortunately, it seems like things keep happening. So I look forward to a day when this book is really old and the problems in it aren't really things we deal with anymore.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kenna Ryan. Hi.
So my question was, how long do you spend thinking about what you're going to write, or do you just write what comes to mind?
I think it depends on the project. So there's some projects where, like there are two that are coming out hopefully next year or the year after, that I outlined everything so that the people who I was trying to sell the project to knew where the story was going ahead of time. And that like I know what needs to happen in the plot and what needs to. This one I didn't outline. This one was pretty, figured out Bijan's voice first and then went from there. I wish I had outlined it because in earlier drafts, there's like a camping trip that I spent so much time on, but there's no, obviously, camping trip in the book, so I wish I had kind of known what I was going to do beforehand. And writing a book takes a lot of time, you know, figuring out what you're going to say, why you want to say it, and even the first draft, and then you revise several drafts later until you feel like you get it and okay. But this one took about 2.5 years. And yeah, and it's not a long book, and it still took a while. So, but yeah, usually it comes with, the first 3 books, they came with the voice of the character. Now I'm kind of figuring out what the plot is first, and then filling in characters who share aspects of my identity and having them go on an adventure rather than having to deal with heavy stuff all the time. Thank you. Okay, last question, Gabby Gerard. Hi.
My question is, what influenced you from your childhood? What influence from your childhood inspired you to become a writer?
Oh gosh, well, Batman and Robin we discussed, very terrible. But I think also, I don't know, like the first job I ever wanted, my uncle asked me, and I was maybe like 3 years old, and I was like, I want to direct cartoons. And so he thought I wanted to like draw or something. I was like, no, I actually want to tell the Bugs Bunny like what to do, like what his motivation is in this scene. But I think the idea of storytelling and trying to tell a story has always been with me. I'm still trying to get better at it, and it still takes a long time, but I just loved reading so much, and I loved reading other people's stories, and I thought maybe that's something I can try. And so I'm thankful I did. It's been really great to like meet with people like you and to have people read my stuff. But it's also a little scary because you're like, oh, this is not just in my journal or computer. This is like out there. But I think, I don't know, you figure out pretty early on like what the stuff you love is, and as you get older you decide, okay, what am I really passionate about and what do I want to pursue? And I think for me as a kid, like having people around who are like, hey, this story's not so bad, you should keep it going. And having friends that also were like, oh, tell us another story or write another story. So yeah, those are things that I always loved, and I hope I can keep doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ladies and
gentlemen, let's give a big hand to the
Thank you guys so much.
G block, right? All right, we're gonna head back to our G block class. Have a great day. Have a great long weekend.
These chairs are honestly
Good for you. Do you think you'll want to be a writer?
Mr. Lowe, do you know how to stop this?
I think it's a button.
There's a lot of buttons on it.
The red button, or the like circle that looks like it says record.
Goodness.
I think usually it's like on the back, like where you put your thumb.
You know.
But I have no idea.
He told me to stop it, but I don't know where.
Let's see. Oh, right here.
Oh.